I'd like to welcome everybody once again. This is the Right Wing Bros podcast coming to you directly today after a terrible tragedy. And I think by the title and by the news, everybody knows what's going on. Charlie Kirk was assassinated in broad daylight today at a university in Utah. Um, I think it's affected a lot of us. Unfortunately, our entire crew wasn't able to be here tonight due to um, emotional stress, due to the murder itself, due to the fact that some of the people we've known, or even one of our team members knew, Charlie, and had met him a couple of times, and it has really impacted him. But I think just speaking from a young person's perspective in Generation Z, that this is a momentous moment. It's a time we actually have to sit here and reflect about what kind of country we want for our future. We've had, since the beginning of this republic, the idea that we're going to solve our political issues through debate, through reasoned and principled discussion, and through the ballot box, not through force of arms, and certainly not through killing our political opponents. And only one other time has this been massively interrupted in our nation's history, and that was the Civil War. And I think everybody, at least on the conservative side of things, can not help but draw an allusion to what happened with Abraham Lincoln at the end of the Civil War. He had fought that war, he had won that war, he had defeated the Confederacy, he had passed the 13th Amendment, he was on the way to enacting legislation that would uplift African Americans and their new citizenship and their new freedom, and that would help restore and heal the nation that had been divided, until he was struck down by a radical Confederate sympathizer. And today I think that's very similar. Charlie was very happy about the turnout of the 2024 election, how Trump had won, and everything for our movement has been going pretty much the right way, or ways in directions we would like to see. And it's so devastating that he won't actually be able to be here to see where the movement goes in the future, when in large part he was the one who built it, especially from the younger perspective. He was a man who built his own career, who went outside the system, someone who fought for what he believed in with his words, was willing to engage with anyone in debate, who was loved by many, who was a good Christian. He leaves behind a grieving mother and two small children, and I think that anyone, regardless of whether you disagree with him or you think he advocated for things that you particularly don't like, or even things you find as detrimental to the future of our nation, the people who are celebrating his death, quite frankly, that reaction is just disgusting. And for a lot of the people, especially on the center left, I really would think better of you. And I think you would think better of yourselves if you thought a little bit more before you posted things that sit there and effectively applaud his death and give coverage to the person who assassinated him, or sit there and point to things like, oh, guns are the issue, or whatever. And guns are not the issue. There's been a mass proliferation of guns throughout American history that have been used for good or evil purposes by multiple sides, multiple factions, multiple individuals. That's not the main problem we have today. The main problem is that individuals like this assassin, assumedly, have been radicalized by the mainstream media, by people on the left who continue to use the language of calling their political opponents, us conservatives, Nazis, fascists, racist enablers, supporters, people who want to put y'all back in chains, as Joe Biden put it, back when he was running in 2020 against Trump. And the fact that last year someone tried to assassinate President Trump, and that no one has learned anything from that. Not a damn thing. None of us have learned. All the people on the left who said we needed to end political polarization, we need to stop the radicalization of language, it only increased from a couple months later, continuing to tell everyone on the left and the very progressive left that Trump is a fascist dictator, that he is the reincarnation of Hitler, that he is a threat to democracy and to their ideal of Western civilization and democracy. That is radicalizing, dehumanizing messaging that effectively paints conservatives in the same way the Nazis sought to paint the Jews, or that the communists sought to paint the kulaks or other property-owning classes within the Soviet Union, who, by and large, many, especially the kulaks, were innocent people. And Charlie was an innocent person. Charlie was somebody who did not have ill will against anyone, who always came to a debate with a smile, who always came out of a area of Christian love. The way he was arguing was out of his Christian love. That's why he advocated for what he advocated, why he fought for what he fought for, and ultimately why he died today was because he stood firmly on his Christian principles of loving thy neighbor and advocating for a society that he felt was God-honoring and God-fearing. And I hope that a bunch of younger people who hopefully watch this video and watch other content related to this for our generation, for Gen Z conservatives, I hope this is a wake-up call for every single one of us. That we would dedicate this moment to continuing the fight that Charlie died for, continuing to push fervently for conservative values, not to sit there and be taken aback by this and to be mulled into a sense of fear, to hiding, to refusing to speak out on your beliefs because you're afraid of getting shot, but instead to have his face in mind when you're considering getting involved in a campaign, when you're considering starting an organization or getting involved politically. The same way that the civil rights activists back in the 1960s who were fighting for racial equality had the image of Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King in their minds as they were struck down for what they believed in. It did not mull them into silence or put them into fear, but instead it gave them a sense of urgency for what their mission and what their cause was. And that's what this needs to be for us on our side of the aisle. This has to be a moment where we sit there and realize that we need to pick up the ball, for lack of a better term. We've been sitting here for the last 80 years on the conservative side of the aisle, barely pushing up until effectively Trump came around, and maybe a little bit when Ronald Reagan was president, but really since the Trump administration we haven't been seeing a lot of grounds, and we've seen a lot of the cultural factors in our lives lost and conceded to the left. Concession after concession after concession, to the point where we're completely fine with mainstream media's outlets posting and uplifting effectively propaganda that allows for the dehumanization in the minds of their most radical elements of the Democratic Party and other far left organizations that are much more militant, to the point where they'll actually come out and assassinate someone like Charlie for no better reason than because he disagrees with them and they see him as an effective propagandist who they can't out-argue. The only way that they could out-argue him was with a bullet, apparently. And that's just sad that it's come to this point in our republic where we can no longer have a civilized discussion of policy, of what party you're... It's even taboo to even talk about what party you're a part of, or to have any real conversations about anything substantive, philosophy, ethics, religion. It's come to a point where nobody can talk about anything anymore. And all the issues are put to the side. And ultimately, that's what the elites in both parties want. The older elite of the GOP whatever you want to call the uniparty, the people who are controlling the strings, they want us to be divided. They want us to be focused on these hyper polarizing issues and never come together and realize that we need to fight for a better future, that we need to vote for a better future. They want us to be afraid. They want us to submit, for lack of a better term. And I, for one, refuse to do that. I refuse to stop fighting for what I believe in, for advocating it every single day, for pushing forward the conservative values that I hold dear and that I've held dear my entire life. I refuse to stop fighting for a better future for my wife and child so that they can experience the American dream as it was meant to be experienced. I look to Charlie's memory to give myself a bolstered sense of importance with this mission in life. And I will have his image in my mind when I'm sitting there and facing a bunch of people yelling at me for what I believe in, or persecution in the workplace for what I believe in, or any other area of life. And remember that Charlie Kirk gave his life for his conservative values, for his Christian principles. Can I do any less? Can I be any less of a man than Charlie? I think that's ultimately the message we all need to take away. Now, as far as the shooting itself, details are pretty sparse at this current time. At this point in time, we do not know the identity of the shooter. That has not been revealed. Supposedly he is, or he or she, or who knows at this point, is in custody, according to the FBI, according to news reports I've seen by Fox News and other media outlets. The original suspect was, I believe, an older man on the ground who has since been released from what I have seen, is not the actual shooter. And there are also videos of someone being on a rooftop at the university and also seemingly running away. I don't know if that individual is involved. Based upon what happened with Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, I would assume that is probably the shooter, but we will wait to see whether that bears out. And I think it's going to be a turning point as far as whether we see these kind of events again. I mean, Steven Crowder pretty much kind of popularized these type of things, and Charlie has also popularized these kind of change my mind events, prove me wrong events, and I think we're going to, for a while, maybe see these go away. The fact that you cannot have a reasoned debate with people that you disagree with without getting shot in the neck, I think that's just very damaging. It's going to further polarize our already polarized nation. It's going to drive people. It's going to embolden people who should not be emboldened to commit acts of violence, which is going to hurt both sides. People, innocent people on both sides. I sincerely hope that that doesn't happen. I sincerely hope that the Trump administration takes this very, very seriously, and that they use the full power of the federal government to crack down on any organizations or individuals who might be involved with this shooting and this assassination. I hope that they will use this as further proof of the unlawlessness that's happening in our urban centers, to the point where Christians, conservatives, and even children at this point, or even, hell, young migrants who are here are in danger of being assassinated just for existing or for their political views, and why we need law and order restored to America. I fully support treating big cities such as D.C. With a federal, basically with a federal takeover of martial law in effect. It's been high time these areas, especially areas in the Midwest like Chicago and Detroit, Minneapolis and St. Paul during the riots in 2020 due to the terrible George Floyd accident, or not accident, incident, have been hotbeds of basically rebellion borderline secessionism, um, and even just beyond that, rampant crime that the people there are unwilling to address because they're part of it. They get kickbacks from it in some way, I'm sure, one way or another, or quite frankly, they're just incompetent and lazy and don't want to do anything about it. Because instead of actually fixing a hard problem, they would rather just sit by, take credit for the few good things that they do, and sit there while the majority of normal people suffer, regardless of race, no matter what they say, whether they, oh, I'm pro this or I'm pro that, or we're uplifting our minorities. The fact is that if you're a mayor of a large city and you're not willing to enforce law and order and you're the rules of our nation, of our constitution, and keeping law-abiding people safe and enabling them to protect themselves with common sense gun reform that allows them to carry weapons to protect themselves, then you're not for anybody. In fact, you're against everybody. You're disarming the people who are able to and should be able to protect themselves and just want to go about their normal lives, who are victims of these tragic events. I think that the administration needs to look at this and needs to seriously come up with a plan of action. And I know that people have said thoughts and prayers, and I think thoughts and prayers are actually important. And I think they do a lot, and I think they will help the family get through this grieving process and hopefully help them to be able to continue their lives in whatever form that may take. I don't know how. I know if I were his family, I would be devastated and I would be at a loss to be where I'm at. I'd be on my knees praying to God, asking, what do I do from here? And for the young conservatives who are watching this, I hope that you are emboldened to continue your activism and to be even more fervent than before. To go the extra mile, to knock that extra door. To go and get involved with that campaign, to go support the MAGA candidate, even though it might be unpopular. Because at the end of the day, Charlie lost his life trying to push for a better alternative for younger Americans who want to have a normal life, who want to have a family, who want to be able to afford that family on a fair income, for people who want to be able to practice their faith without having the threat of being oppressed by their own government and basically bullied and threatened into professing things they do not believe to be true or right. I think we all need to realize that we have to step up, that Charlie's death cannot just be the end of the youth movement for conservatives. And I mean, it won't. Turning Point is a great organization, and it has a lot of very competent people, and I know that they will continue pushing for what Charlie believed, but I think it's dependent upon us to start even more organizations, more 501c4s, more 501c3s that have a conservative worldview, even if they don't push for politics directly. We need to have better networking amongst conservatives, and we need to be willing to uplift younger voices. We need to do this in Charlie's memory. We need to allow, and I'll say this to the elites of the GOP, the older boomers who are in charge, and the ones who know that they have basically been grasping onto power, trying to maintain their rhino standards, their live and let live. This is a defining moment. You can no longer say that everything's business as usual and we'll get back to an era before Trump. No, that's not happening. We're not going back to George Bush republicanism. We're not going back to the slow decline into progressive depravity. We're done. Charlie gave his life to see a socially conservative Christian America emerge. And as for all of us young people on the right in Generation Z, that's what we're going to continue to push for. And we're going to push for it more fervently than ever. So I will say to the shooter that you have not discouraged us in any way. If anything, you have made us angrier, and you have given us even more conviction to fight for the very things that you oppose. And I promise you that if for some reason if you only get a sentence of life, that by the time that you breathe your last breath behind the jail bar, you will see a very conservative and Christian America emerge, because partially because of the actions that you took. That you ending that senseless life, if anything, has supercharged the young Christian right. And you'll find that God can use the worst tragedies to bring about the best possible future for multiple people. And we know that God is there in the midst of tragedy. We know that he was there in the midst of his son dying on the cross as a martyr for our sins. And in many ways, Charlie also sacrificed himself. He is a martyr for Christian values and principles, for the right for those to be spoken aloud in the public space without fear. And sometimes it's discouraging, being in this movement where you're only allowed to progress if you have the right last name, or if you have to be hooked into the right people, or your parents knew the right people, or whatever social marker that determines certain people get into certain places. It's discouraging. But Charlie was somebody who existed outside the system, who did not finish college, who created his own conservative organization, and through his tenacity, his wit, and his hard work and perseverance was able to create a movement that has literally changed thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives, and has made America a better place because of it. And that's an inspiration to me. That's an inspiration, I think, to any young conservative person who's having a hard time starting out, getting into politics, trying to carve out a area of influence for themselves. Do not be discouraged. And that this is our time. This is our country. We have to be willing, however, to work for it. We have to fight at the ballot box. We have to fight at every local, state, and federal election. It cannot just be during the big presidential elections that we turn out anymore. We cannot be passive conservatives. There can be no longer a silent majority. That era is gone. It's done. We must be vocal. We must be as vocal as Charlie was in his beliefs if we wish to keep them. Otherwise, what happened to Charlie will happen to every single one of us. Or what happened to Charlie will happen to many more of us if we do not stand strong in our faith, our belief in God and the principles that he has handed down to us, and for what's morally right, and for what our founders knew was morally right, and that they enshrined in the Constitution. It's our constitutional rights. We must continue to fight for the right to have conservative free speech on campuses, in the public spaces, to where people do not need to shy away and worry about their HR department firing them if they voice a very conservative opinion at work. That's the future, that's the dream that Charlie had. And that's a dream that a lot of us younger Generation Z conservatives want to live in. And it's attainable. It's there. There is a path to victory. 2024 showed us that. Even in the midst of despair, when we all thought everything was going against us and everything was being rigged against us, we were able to win and win big. The American people were able to see through the lies and the deception, and they came out en masse to support us, more so than any other election before. So we need to remember Charlie as we go into the midterm season next year. We need to remember him as we go into the primaries. We need to think about Charlie, and we need to think about what he fought for, what he died for. And we need to look at those candidates and we need to evaluate them. It's like, is this person going to be a fighter like Charlie? Is this person going to be willing to give their all for their principles, for our constitutional republic like Charlie? If the answer is no and they're weak, we don't need to support them. We need to find strong candidates who know what they believe and they know why they believe it, and who are not bought and sold like sheep and cattle by corporations or special interest groups. And this goes for people on both sides. I'm mainly speaking for Republicans. And I pray that we, especially younger conservatives, will use this moment to pressure the Trump administration to really lobby the what's left of the establishment GOP to finally sit there and stop being a hindrance to the rest of the movement and get on board with the program, to help us push for socially conservative reforms, to help us push for a better America, even if it's not necessarily the best for their pocketbooks, to push for reforms that would include term limits, that would include banning Congress members from stock trading, for policies that would allow for the reindustrialization of America, especially the Midwest where I live and I am a regional advocate for, to push for better job creation, better wages, to push for the right-wing populist Christian principles that we all hold near and dear and that we want to see. And I think that Generation Z, especially males within Generation Z, we have the power to make that vision, that future, a reality. You look at the polls, you look at the metrics from the last election. The reason that Trump won is because he overwhelmingly did well with young Gen Z college kids. People between 18 to 25 to 29. He overperformed by 12 points, which is insane. The left thought that it owned younger kids coming out of the school system. They thought that they had them locked down, and then COVID ended up red pilling a lot of people, and a lot of people saw the future that the Democrat Party had in store for them, and they've rejected it by and large. And now it is up to us to sit there and offer the younger generation a better future, a better vision than what the left has to offer. And Charlie understood that. Charlie was all about offering that better future, of not necessarily always having to adhere to the establishment GOP line, of finding alternatives to find a better way to do things that worked for everybody, that worked for the majority of Americans. And that's what we have to dedicate ourselves to today. We cannot be locked into ideological babble. We cannot be seduced by the siren song of everything is fine and you need to keep your head down and carry on and not fight back. Just lay down and accept your place in the new world, in the new system. We can't do that. We have to fight vigorously for our positions. We have to advocate well. We have to be more organized than any other group in this country if we want to see our vision for America succeed. And I think that's something Charlie would want. I originally had intended this to be a longer response video with a couple of guests and stuff, guests and our other partners for the podcast, but as I said, this has affected a lot of us to the point we're not really able to talk about it just yet. So as more details emerge, we will continue to provide updates and provide more context and hopefully provide more opinions and reactions to what went on today. And I pray that God will be with Charlie Kirk's family, with the people at Turning Point, that he would be with the rest of us young men and women in Generation Z who want to fight for a better future. That he would give us strength, that he would help us defeat any spirit of fear that would emerge within us, that he would instead give us a spirit of courage to continue advocating peacefully and fervently for our positions, regardless of the consequences that are threatened upon us by for lack of a better word, crazy domestic terrorists or whoever this shooter turns out to be. Pray that God would bless us all and that God would bless America. I'm sorry I had to add this in on editing, but as soon as I had finished my recording for our response to Charlie Kirk's assassination, President Trump has released a official statement about Charlie Kirk's demise, and I think it would be a service to everybody who listens to this podcast to listen to what the president has to say.
To my great fellow Americans, I am filled with grief and anger at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk on a college campus in Utah. Charlie inspired millions, and tonight all who knew him and loved him are united in shock and horror. Charlie was a patriot who devoted his life to the cause of open debate and the country that he loved so much, the United States of America. He fought for liberty, democracy, justice, and the American people. He's a martyr for truth and freedom, and there's never been anyone who was so respected by youth. Charlie was also a man of deep, deep faith, and we take comfort in the knowledge that he is now at peace with God in heaven. Our prayers are with his wife, Erica, the two young, beloved children, and his entire family, who he loved more than anything in the world. We ask God to watch over them in this terrible hour of heartache and pain. This is a dark moment for America. Charlie Kirk traveled the nation, joyfully engaging with everyone interested in good faith debate. His mission was to bring young people into the political process, which he did better than anybody ever, to share his love of country and to spread the simple words of common sense. On campuses nationwide, he championed his ideas with courage, logic, humor, and grace. It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now. My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, law enforcement officials, and everyone else who brings order to our country. From the attack on my life in Butler, Pennsylvania last year, which killed a husband and father, to the attacks on ICE agents, to the vicious murder of a healthcare executive in the streets of New York, to the shooting of House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and 3 others, radical left political violence has hurt too many innocent people and taken too many lives. Tonight, I ask all Americans to commit themselves to the American values for which Charlie Kirk lived and died, the values of free speech, citizenship, the rule of law, and the patriotic devotion and love of God. Charlie was the best of America, and the monster who attacked him was attacking our whole country. An assassin tried to silence him with a bullet, but he failed, because together we will ensure that his voice, his message, and his legacy will live on for countless generations to come. Today, because of this heinous act, Charlie's voice has become bigger and grander than ever before, and it's not even close. May God bless his memory, may God watch over his family, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
They don't.
I'm personally very thankful that President Trump was so swift to be on top of this tragedy. He has been all day. I believe he was one of the first people to let people know that Charlie was dead. And I'm thankful that he takes this with some seriousness and that he understands that this is a turning point for America, especially in our youth, that Charlie had done so much with his life, as I've already talked about here tonight. But I pray that President Trump's words would provide our listeners with some comfort, and that his reaction would be not just merely words, but would be a point for this administration going forward that they are not to be trifled with, that we are not to be trifled with, and that these actions will have consequences, and that we are not sheep. I thank President Trump for his message tonight, and I think it resolved a lot of the fears I had that Charlie's death wouldn't get as much attention as it rightly deserves, nor the response that it deserves. And I'm happy to see that President Trump is taking this with all manner of seriousness, and that he is looking to provide justice for Charlie and for his family, and that he is still committed to protecting all Americans, regardless of where they are at and where they are, and that he rightly calls out the demagoguery that the left has engaged in for a better part of 2015, 10, doesn't really matter, years now, and that demagoguery almost claimed President Trump's own life last year on July 13th. So I think going on, I'm hoping that people on the left, who, regardless of their level of Trump deranged syndrome, would come to realize that it's time to put the pitchforks down. Um, the radicalization that you have promoted and provided cover for over the last 8 years has led to Charlie's death, and that they would take personal responsibility for that, and that they would moderate their actions and their rhetoric moving forward. That we would no longer hear the calls of racism, fascism, and totalitarianism that are totally uncalled for and unwarranted from the mainstream media, from left wing personalities who are just looking for clickbaits for people on the other side, looking for fame and to profit off of this. And I pray that God will do something amazing with the situation. And as hard as it is to believe, I think that Charlie's passing will be the turning point for this country, for our youth, and it will make younger people wake up and realize what the left wants for their future. And I pray that they, along with me, my friends, and our communities, will choose the path that Charlie wanted us to go down, the one that leads to true peace, prosperity, and happiness under Jesus Christ. I thank you all for listening tonight and for continuing to listen to this little added on segment at the end. I thank President Trump for his clear and swift, heartfelt response that this will not be tolerated, and that the violent language and radicalization on the extreme left needs to end.